Have you ever bought a themed die set and then thought, I love this, but I don't know what to do with it? If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. In this video, I'm taking a few supplies that feel hard to use, like a very specific die set, an embossing folder, and some leftover pieces, and I'm turning them into 3 simple but structured card backgrounds. I'll show you how to use die cut negatives as masks, where to add ink so it stays controlled, and how to make themed designs feel intentional instead of overwhelming. Let's dive in. For the first card, the focus is on creating interest in the background using dies to cut apertures, and for that, I'm using this collection from Spellbinders called Make It and Bake It by the very talented Tina Smith. It's an adorable collection, but really specific to baking, so it's perfect for showing you how to use themed dies to make creative 5x7 backgrounds. By the way, you don't have to own this specific collection because this is a great time to shop your stash and grab the themed dies you find hard to use. The idea here is to create backgrounds by cutting these shapes out from the panel and build the rest of the design around it. For the focal point, I'll need a bowl of cookie dough and decide on the other elements as I go along. I'll cut into this panel so the darker panel underneath shows through, and to do that, I'll line up the dies this way. To make it easy to line up the dies, I'll use a spare magnetic sheet because the magnet will keep everything from shifting around. The cardstock is fairly thick, so the magnet doesn't feel super strong, but it should work well enough. Once everything is taped down, I'll run it through my die cutting machine and very carefully lift the dies away. I'm only cutting the top half of the panel, so I have some space to place the other design elements on the bottom. This creates a beautiful window effect where the darker cardstock underneath creates a beautiful contrast. Now I'll cut out the remaining elements and create this fun sentiment, "You're my better half." I'm ready to put this design together. Since this video is all about creating backgrounds, I already assembled the die cut elements off camera to save time, but I'll post that assembly video soon so you can see how I put them together in case you do own this set of dies. If you enjoy baking, I think you're going to love this set, but regardless of that, it's so easy to create a fun background with a simple design for any occasion. And if you're looking for the list of supplies, you'll find them listed in my blog post that's linked in the video description. You'll find affiliate links, which means that if you purchase something using those links, I'll likely make a tiny commission with no extra cost to you. But it will go a long way to help support my channel, so thank you if you choose to use those links to shop. All the pieces are assembled, and now I'm ready to finish the card. This card really shows how shaped dies can be used to create background and not just focal images. For the second card, I'm focusing on what I like to call faux spotlight coloring because I do some ink blending on the background and then mount a foreground panel with an aperture for it to appear like a spotlight. I'll start by cutting out the shape of the cookie sheet from the center of a 5x7 panel and reserve the die cut for another project. Next, I'll emboss the cutout panel using the same embossing folder. Before assembling anything, I will use mustard seed distress oxide to create a colored faux spotlight, checking to make sure the colored part is large enough for the aperture. Since the ink will smooth out quite a bit when it dries, I'm not really looking for a perfect blend. To bring out the embossing details on the panel, I'll use a very light touch of lost shadow because it adds contrast without overpowering the design. And I'm using a brayer to keep the ink on the surface. Using a foam blender is another alternative, which I'll show you in the next segment. But no matter which one you're using, you need to have a very light hand because that helps keep the ink on the surface. And another quick reminder, you don't need these exact die sets to do this. You can absolutely get creative with whatever you already have in your stash. I'll start putting the card together by adhering the front panel with some foam tape. Do you see how it creates a faux spotlight here? I'll adhere the sentiments so I can create my card layout around it. Next, I'll arrange the elements to test the layout. Once I'm satisfied with the arrangement, I'll use a piece of press and seal wrap, another hack I learned from Jennifer McGuire, and gently lift off the card base so I can apply adhesive without ruining the arrangement. This is how the card turned out in the end. For the third card, the focus is on creating a controlled spotlight effect using a mask. And I also want to show you how I test out my color palette before committing to a background. Color palettes can be a little challenging sometimes, so I recently came up with the idea of creating a color swatch for backgrounds and took some time to create several ink blended panels using some of my favorite distress oxides. This serves as an excellent reference point, and I'm finding this very useful. If you're curious, I've used punch sugar, speckled egg, kitsch flamingo, and lost shadow for these panels. Now, here's how I use them. Laying the die cut elements on each panel makes it much easier to see which background allows the elements to pop. For instance, I decided that spun sugar creates a soft contrast for the die cut elements and creates a cohesive look. Now that I've chosen my color, I'll use a 5x7 panel and use the negative die cut as a mask. I'll center and secure it over the panel and blend spun sugar through the opening, applying more ink in the center and diffusing it outward. I'll now emboss the ink blended panel using the same embossing folder. To avoid water reactive splatter marks from the distress oxide, I'll only mist the backside of the cardstock before embossing. I'm using Lost Shadow Distress Oxide again with a dome foam blender, and I'm being very light-handed so I don't get ink in the recessed areas instead of only over the embossing. I'm also trying to stay within the spotlight shape created by the mask. Since I don't have coordinating dies for the sentiment stamps, I'll use the label die from the Spellbinders A2 Matting Basics die set and create the sentiment label. I want to ensure the sentiment is perfectly centered and aligned, so I'll create a stamping jig for that. By the way, I've demonstrated this technique in great detail in a couple of hack videos, and I'll link them in the video description in case you're interested in watching the process. I've cut the power cord from black glitter cardstock that has a white core, which I'm not fancying too much. So I'll use a black Sharpie to color the edges so they don't look stark white. And likewise, since I reused a piece of white cardstock to create the label, I can see some black ink along the edges. I'll use a white gel pen to cover the black marks on this one. I'll finish the card by adding all the die cuts to the card front and adding the sentiment label over a vellum band. The vellum diffuses the background that helps the sentiment stand out better. This technique creates a structured spotlight effect that feels intentional and controlled, even though the blending itself is very soft. Here are the final cards. These 3 cards all use the same embossing folder and die sets, but you can use them in different ways to create a variety of backgrounds. I didn't demonstrate the obvious shaker card, plus I can already think of a couple more ideas using the smaller dies. So the sky is the limit. Here is a great way to maximize your supplies and get multiple looks from the same tools. I recently made a video using vellum to enhance cards, which will give you more ideas for maximizing your supplies, and you can watch that video here.